Welcome to Galaxy Brains.
An infinite amount of cash.
I'm your host, Alex Thorn.
The U.S. banking system is sound and resilient.
Bitcoin made a new all-time high.
If you're not long, you're short.
Satoshi's going to come on there, laugh hysterically, go quiet. All Bitcoin's going to be erased.
Bitcoin's the best crypto out there.
Bitcoin is going to zero.
Welcome back to Galaxy Brains. As always, I'm your host, Alex Thorn, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy, and we have a great episode for you today. Co-founder and CEO of Swan Bitcoin, Cory Klippsten, is our guest. We're going to talk with Cory about everything going on in the Bitcoin space, what to expect, nation-state adoption, a variety of things. We'll also, of course, check with my good friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading, as always. Absolutely crazy market stuff happening. Bitcoin reaching an all-time high almost every day, $93,300 as I speak to you now on Wednesday. Before we get to that, I remind you to please refer to the link to the disclaimer in the podcast notes and note that none of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Galaxy or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. It's been a week since President-elect Donald Trump won his second non-consecutive term, only the second person in history to accomplish that feat. Since then, both the Senate and the House have been called for Republicans, so it is genuinely a red wave. The president and his party will be in control of a unified government. Markets have been going bonanza. People are trying to price in what that means. Bitcoin, I think, and cryptos generally are among the best performing over the last week. I think the net change in regulatory posture expected from a Trump administration versus the prior Biden administration is the biggest change of any sort of regulatory situation for any asset class. We said this at the beginning before the election that altcoins had probably the highest risk of election risk of any market. Well, the election appears to have gone in crypto's favor, and so that risk is now to the upside. We'll talk about this with Bimnet a fair amount. Let's get right into the show. Let's go now to our friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, Bimnet, welcome back to Galaxy Brains.
Thanks for having me.
What an exciting time. It's now 1 week since the election, and I think we recorded right after the election. So this is our second episode with a President-elect Trump. We now have a unified Congress. The House has been called, right, in favor of the Republicans. Obviously, we're going to talk about cryptos, which have been outperforming among all asset classes. First, though, today there were CPI numbers. Just what were they, and where do we stand?
Yeah, I mean, they were smack dab in line, 0.3 month on month for core CPI. The markets, viewed it as a benign number. You saw twos rally, from like 435 to 425 in yield, and you've sold back off since. You had a little bit more pricing put into the December FOMC. So, as we speak, it's around 20 basis points, and the, Jan FOMC has about 27 basis points priced. So basically over the next two meetings, one cut's expected, most likely 80% chance of one in December. I think basically what this price action tells you is that, folks were a little bit worried about an upside surprise in inflation. But to be honest, like what we should really care about is the forward on inflation and forward expectations of inflation. As we've said numerously on this podcast, Trumponomics is fundamentally inflationary. His main three objectives with the economy are he wants to deport, millions of prime age illegal immigrants. That's going to, tighten up the labor force. He wants to put tariffs on some of our trade partners. That's again inflationary. And cutting taxes as well is pro-cyclical and pro-growth. And so, these three pillars of his policy should net be inflationary. And so, I think that's really what the market should be focused on. And we do have some seasonal effects that should, kind of push inflation a bit higher over the next, call it 4 to 6 months. And so, if you really digest all of that, I think, I still think there's a conceivable path for rates to go higher. I think 10s can go to close to 5% versus 440 right now. So I think there's still a really decent repricing of the fixed income curve that you can have over the course of the next couple of months, and as you get into like realizing like what Trump's policies are actually going to be.
Interesting. So let's switch to crypto and Bitcoin, because I mean,
Please.
you can look here at the block clock. Bitcoin is trading at $92,720 according to the block clock.
Yeah.
We've hit almost 93. I think we might have even hit 93. I mean, we are a stone's throw from $100,000 Bitcoin. What's driving the increase? It's a rhetorical question, but tell us.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of it is based on expectations of a friendlier administration coming into power. On the back of that, we've seen tremendous inflows into the ETF products. We've also seen a pretty sizable pickup in leverage across all futures and perps exchanges. And there's been consistent buy pressure in the US from large players.
Yeah.
And so I would say it's a lot more buyers than sellers, and it had a technical breakout and folks are chasing it, and there's a lot of FOMO in the market.
Yeah.
And it's in price discovery fundamentally.
Yeah.
And what's the price of something? It's the price that people are willing to pay, and every day it seems to be going higher and higher. So I think there's a lot of folks that are now being stopped into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Right? Where if you're an institution, you're looking at it, it's trading, like tens of billions of dollars a day. There's an ETF. It's liquid. It's a Trump play. It's akin to gold. It hedges you from monetary debasement. In theory, it acts like a risk asset. Basically, it's really hard for any institution to ignore.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are, but when you see price action like this, it forces you to pay attention. And quite frankly, it's pretty simple. If you're not long, you're short.
Yeah. It feels like risk is to the upside right now. We've got a known expected pile of positive catalysts, but they haven't come yet. So we've got very little tangible specifics to work with. And the market seems to just be saying, well, in that case, like, I'm just not long enough.
Yeah.
Right? Or if I have none, like, I need to get long this thing because, even if it takes, inaugurations in January, a couple months for XYZ, a cabinet nominee to be confirmed by the Senate or a regulator to be confirmed by the Senate, like, once you get out there, I feel like it'll be more like headline and sort of on the ground driven. But right now, you've just got this period where all you know is it's going to be really positive, and so you just have to own it.
You've got a great chart and a great story.
Yeah.
And that's really all you need in markets.
Yeah.
And I would not be surprised if we hit 100K in the next week or two.
Honestly, I mean, at this
At
rate,
this pace?
it could easily be like tomorrow.
It could be tomorrow.
Today, tomorrow, yeah, this week. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
I mean, you have to assume there'll be some resistance there just from the
Yeah,
size of the number.
Yeah, I mean, gravity does take hold
Yeah.
at some point. And basically, Bitcoin's a 1.7, probably these
Almost.
$1.8 trillion asset, $1.9 trillion asset. And so every 10%, that's like, $190 billion of wealth being created. And so that's a lot of potential sell pressure. And
Yeah.
so definitely at certain levels, gravity, 93,300 as we speak, gravity will take hold.
Right.
And folks do sell at big round numbers. And
Right.
so I would expect there's resistance at 100K.
You have to assume that, I think.
That's a fair assumption.
So last sort of question here, there's been a lot of rumors on X and discussion. I know Mike was asked about this on Bloomberg about an hour ago, again on Wednesday that we're recording, about nation state adoption, whether it's the Bitcoin, national Bitcoin stockpile,
Yeah.
which is what President-elect Trump called it in Nashville in July, or other nations supposedly maybe looking at it. Like, does it? Could that be it? I mean, I don't know. I'm looking. You said it at the top.
I mean,
You said it at the top, though, that we've been seeing most of this action during U.S. hours. And,
Yeah.
and overnight, U.S., it's been selling off a bit. And then, so it doesn't feel to me like a foreign nation is the one bidding. Seems more like U.S. investors and U.S. institutions.
I think if you play Bitcoin out over the next 10 years, the game theory probably suggests that you will see nation states, figuring out ways to buy this. central banks already do this with gold, where they print soft money and buy hard money.
Very.
And so, if you
Must be nice.
but yeah, I mean, if you're thinking about it from that lens, Bitcoin's so cheap.
Right.
Like the moment you start to see real nation states accumulate this stuff, not saying that El Salvador isn't a real nation state, but
Big, giant size, though.
yeah.
The Emirates.
But
or
again,
the
it's
Middle
like
East
one
or
of
the
those
US
things where if you are doing that, that means that you're conceding the fact that your money's not really good money.
Yeah.
And so it's really
This has been, I agree with this. I think if the U.S. is to do this,
It
you got to
would
be
not.
very careful in
yeah, it
how
shouldn't.
they narrative this, right? Like
No, they-
we haven't bought anything to back the dollar in decades.
Yes, it's
right?
backed by the full faith.
Right.
And
If you have to buy, but I think this is why he called it a strategic stockpile, not a reserve. I think there
Yeah.
are ways to get something done. And to be clear, if other nations think we're going to do something like this and they start front running and trying to do it, then we really should do it.
yeah,
That game theory is powerful.
it's super powerful. But I if I'm a country that respects my own currency, I wouldn't.
I know.
Wouldn't back it.
I've said if you were to back your currency with toothpicks, like it would harm your currency's value.
Yes. But you could definitely see a lot of like EM nations,
Or like
etc.
that's right, or like sovereign wealth funds rather
Yeah.
than central banks. Like
Yeah,
there's
no,
ways.
absolutely. There are ways. Yeah.
All right. Well, my friend Bimnet Abibi, I'll let you get back to it. Bimnet from Galaxy Digital Trading. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go now to our guest, Cory Klippsten, founder and CEO of Swan Bitcoin. Cory, thank you so much for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Look, Alex, it's long overdue. It's good to see you. And I don't think we've ever done kind of face-to-face like this before, despite probably 100+ hours on Clubhouse back in, boy, we're getting long in the tooth. That was probably December 2020, like Q1 21.
It was. I was like, I think my 5-year-old was maybe a year and a couple months old back then. And I'd be like putting him to bed with one AirPod in the ear. And that was, by the way, kind of, I think maybe a good reference point, because in December 2020, we were just about to cross, maybe did just cross the prior all-time high. Obviously, we crossed the actual 2021 prior all-time high back in March, but just over the last week or two, finally broke out of that flat, crazy long channel range we've been in, but also broke it finally in adjusted terms for inflation. It's been a lot of inflation. What's your take just on the latest price action and where we are, what it tells you about Bitcoin?
Yeah, this was a pretty wild weekend on relatively thin trading volume, seeing a rip just shy of 90K. We were just laughing about it. It looks like we're taking another run at it as we record here on Tuesday around midday Pacific. We'll see if we can punch through $90,000 per Bitcoin. How crazy is it to say that? Yeah, it's funny, man. You just kind of zoom out and you think about what it's coming in 2017 like I did. I always wonder what was life like for people that came in 2011, 2013, 2015. And I didn't really have any sense that I felt like I had seen much the last bull run. But going through another bear market and seeing the charge up here, now I'm starting to feel like I've been around the block for a little while and can be a little bit more kind of chill about it and feel like it's worth sharing some perspectives with people that are relatively newer to it. Whereas I feel like if I was trying to give advice in 21, 22, it felt a little bit of an imposter syndrome because I didn't quite have my stripes yet. I feel like you got to get that second bear in, and then you can start to feel like you see some patterns,
Yeah, and that bear in 22, I mean, the collapse of the lenders and exchanges and stable coins, like this is a pretty large amount of carnage. I think, kudos to anybody who hodled through that. You've definitely earned it. I mean, it feels like a vastly different market than a couple years ago from an infrastructure standpoint, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels incredibly de-risked from an infrastructure standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from a just kind of, just even like a market risk. You talk about how I think 4 years ago, most people in mainstream and most people in markets would have grouped Bitcoin under crypto, and now it's like all the presidential candidates and the administration talks about Bitcoin and crypto. So it's like even that is kind of gone from the conversation on CNBC and and in politics and regulatory and everything like that. So it's kind of like you just get to move forward and look for the next beast to slay. And I think that's a really fun thing to spend time on, that I think about a lot. And I think kind of on the tech side, it's kind of like, how do you scale custody and payments, whether it's going to be Arc, Lightning, combination of the two, or new things. And then on the sort of investable asset side, where I spend most of my time and effort, what is the next domino to fall, and can you make that happen sooner? Like, I've always thought that maybe we can get rid of cap gains tax in the 2030s, but like, do we have a shot at getting that done in the next 2 years before it's a lame duck administration? Like, if there's all this Bitcoin momentum and we just, kind of grease the wheels by always calling it the Trump pump and, stroke their egos, like, can you get rid of cap gains tax for Bitcoin somehow? Because that to me is the biggest unlock that brings about medium of exchange faster and kind of turns us into this big global currency. I didn't think that would be possible until like $1 million a coin, but maybe you can do it a lot earlier.
Yeah, the president-elect did say in an interview a couple weeks ago, it's actually crazy. He said basically like, well, like if, Bitcoin's money, like why should you have to pay capital gains tax on money? And what a 180 from, you remember his statement, I think he said it on the phone to CNBC in like 2019, but he said Bitcoin is not, he tweeted it, Bitcoin is not money. And I
Right.
like the dollar. And so, I mean, yeah, that would be a huge unlock. No capital gains tax on transactions would be, I mean, just game changing. I think it's one of the
Yeah.
reasons why typically when I spend Bitcoin, I like to spend and replace, basically, right? Like
Yeah.
just buy some and then send it, right? Because I know that I want to pay someone in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I want them to receive Bitcoin because they're willing to and able to, and that's good for the Bitcoin economy. But I'm not like tapping into my cold storage to buy stuff, right?
But like,
And
does your accountant even let you get away with spend and replace, and not being a sale of that specific lot? Like, it's all kind of gray area,
yeah,
and they're never going to come and like actually look at the taxes and audit everybody, and so you're kind of just lost in the numbers. But the big unlock is when you tell all the people that don't follow it closely that it's okay,
hmm
right?
yeah.
And that's when it just really starts to take
And
off.
maybe also too, like if you tell institutional investors or people in big size that like they can sell with no gains, like no taxes, like they can come in and out. I mean, that's a huge consideration that wealth has to take in.
100%. Yeah. When you trade forex, you get taxed on like gains for, if you do a yen trade and you get in the money. I mean, it
Mhm.
is interesting. Like, you would actually have to make it legal tender. Uh, it would have to go beyond just treating it like another currency.
I think, right, certain types of treasury trades are tax free. Is that right? Like a UST directly, though. Certainly not like, a fund that holds treasuries, right? That's
Right.
actually itself a security.
The
That would
treasury
be a big
itself.
unlock. It's crazy that's even something that's on the table. When you talk about de-risking market infrastructure before,
Mhm.
to go back to the infrastructure side, what is it that in your mind has happened, or that, why is that?
Yeah, well, I think that some of it is regulatory and just not allowing these, let's call it the CFI lender category, of which there are some survivors, but not letting them use the language of retail banking and savings and promote themselves that way, because that was all kind of like an FTC violation from the get-go, whether it was Voyager or, Gemini Earn or BlockFi,
Celsius.
Celsius. They were all
Yeah.
kind of doing really shady things on the marketing side, it appeared. And then I think also just some of this is just waking up to, of the market, understanding the dramatic difference, let's say, with leverage of rehypothecated versus non-rehypothecated, which is basically, you post your Bitcoins to get a loan, whether that's for leverage or paying for your kids' college or whatever. You didn't want to sell your Bitcoin again because you didn't want to incur the cap gains tax, or just didn't want to sell. And then what does that centralized institution that you posted your Bitcoin to do with your Bitcoin? And they can drive the rates down lower if they lend it out the backside, and so they can give you a better rate. If they don't do that, you're going to pay a slightly higher rate, but you can probably look at your coins on chain, and essentially the loss ratio is zero. There's been 12 plus years of Unchained and Silvergate collectively doing that business model with non-rehypothecated, and it's a zero loss ratio business because it's great collateral, instantly margin callable into 24/7 deep global liquid markets. So
Mhm.
it's pristine collateral, basically, as Saylor used to say.
Yeah, it is, and it is highly transparent too. So
Yeah.
there's no question of whether it's there, if it is, if you know where it is and it's not rehypothecated. Also, right, like what about the exchanges? Obviously FTX. I mean, the biggest financial blow up in history, or thereabouts. Huge damage to the market. It marked like a multi-year low at like I think 16.2 or 15.8 or something in
I
November
looked at
2020.
it yesterday. Yeah, dude, it hit 15.7,
It's
which is crazy.
crazy.
I think it was
We
November
opened
20th. Yeah.
Yeah, and we opened the year, I remember, because like January 1st, 16.5 thereabouts. So
Hmm.
that's sort of what I think about. You kind of had a hangover from the carnage of November, December 22. But I remember being back in the seat. January 1st was like, it's a new year. We're at these crazily too low levels. You've got fund managers and stuff starting a new year's P&L. And we basically went up only from there all the way through the banking crisis.
Hmm.
Does the exchange and brokerage space feel, safer, better, more transparent to you now?
Yeah, it definitely is. It seems like a lot of the infrastructure providers have shored themselves up and become a lot better. So this would be like, the BitGos and the Backs, and especially now that they're heading into a bull market and their revenues look better. I think everybody kind of collectively, like if you survived, then you were able to raise and build and become much more robust. And now you have a bunch of new entrants from TradFi because it looks like, with BNY Mellon getting the exception for SAB 121, and I think a lot of others will follow, and they'll actually have a lot of business because those are the firms that, TradFi buyers of TradFi services prefer to work with. These guys they've worked with for decades, or they've been around for 100 plus years. So I think that will just create a lot more pressure to deliver high quality services to any customer facing apps or businesses or brokerages or small exchanges or whatever it is. And we can start to see this kind of, renewed entrepreneurship and ways to configure services in an attractive way and kind of serve your market. And so, I really believe that Bitcoin financial services or Bitcoin centric fintech, however you want to call it or slice it, is a category that will be large in the future. And I think we have to create that category because obviously the market went toward crypto exchanges. And that's kind of what the market had been for the last 10 to 12 years. And, I'm just like proud to be in that group of companies that's driving that forward. And I think it'll be massive. And I think a Bitcoin investor that doesn't care about, flipping a bunch of trades in and out of cryptos wants a different set of services and products across retirement and asset-backed loans, and maybe like a BLOC instead of a HELOC, Bitcoin line of credit, things like that. I think there's a lot of things are really obvious in that array of services that you'll want to provide for those companies like us that actually handle end customers. And then we have all of the institutional folks that figure out how to serve kind of B to B to C, with us being the intermediary or the integrator and handling the client relationships. And I think that's what's really gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, is that layer of people that provide to companies like ours is maturing, and new entrants are a lot better than the average of who was there before.
Yeah, I think that's right. You got to burn out the underbrush in order for the new forest to
Yeah.
thrive. And there definitely was a lot of burning out, but now I think it's really quite mature. And also you have so many places to buy in a safe way. And, literally you can buy it on your fidelity.com account, which is crazy. When I was at Fidelity, we were like begging them to turn that on because we're like,
Yep.
I don't think you're going to like beat Coinbase on like, many coins or whatever, but like you got 30 million brokerage accounts, like just let those people buy. Come so for the ETFs too. What's your take overall on the ETFs? I remember when they were launching back in January and around then, some people are asking like, is this bad for Bitcoin? Like or even like, is this what Satoshi had in mind? It was supposed to be able to hold it yourself. Like now it's like in a brokerage account. Like what's your take on them? They've obviously been wildly popular.
Yeah. So look, there's certainly pros and cons. I think on balance, they're wildly positive for Bitcoin. I think Satoshi and Hal wrote at length about how inevitable it would be that financial institutions would hold Bitcoin and have different reserve ratios, and they would compete on that. And the level of transparency afforded by the Bitcoin blockchain, the way it's constructed, lets them compete on their levels of reserve. And we're nowhere close to that because people just don't understand that paradigm. So it's still 10 to 30 years away or something that banks will actually compete that way. But I think it's kind of inevitable that this will be this base layer, but it will not all be equity. There will be credit even in Bitcoin, but it has to have a dramatically larger capacity than it does and dramatically lower volatility, including lower volatility to the upside, because nobody's ever going to borrow in Bitcoin that they have to pay back in Bitcoin until they have an expectation that the purchasing power isn't going to run away from them completely. That might be next century. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll see how long it takes until it chills
I know
out.
it's so scarce and like so perfectly scarce that you have to imagine. The way I sort of think about it is like, it's not necessarily that everyone in the world adopts it. It's that like everyone in the world finally gets it, and they're either using it or not. But like, there's no more like green field. It's like gold, right? Not everybody owns gold, but it's, everyone has decided whether or not they want to own gold. Like, they think they know what gold is, and so it's much more stable. Obviously, there's still volatility sometimes.
Yeah.
Paint that picture for me in your mind, by the way, of what
Sure.
like the big success in the future looks like. Does it have to be Bitcoin? I mean, you've done a little bit of it already, but a lot of people say that it has to replace, for example, fiat currency for medium of exchange. Does it to win, or what's your sort of, not your likelihood, but your sort of utopian view? Like, what does the total victory for Bitcoin look like?
I mean, I often try to understand what I think will actually happen. And so I spend all of my time on that rather than
Well,
trying to
feel
think
free to
about what
take
I'd
that
like to
then.
see.
That's probably
So
better, because honestly,
I
the
think it's
utopian is probably pretty
inevitable.
similar for a lot of us, right? Like, but
Yeah.
what's
I
the
mean,
most likely
I
winning
actually
scenario?
think it's inevitable that Bitcoin eventually becomes the dominant global currency used by, basically everyone, unless they're really under the thumb of like a geographic tyrant, like in some small jurisdiction or something
Mhm.
like that. So I think that's probably inevitable. It's not necessary for Bitcoin to deliver, 80 or 90% of the good that it can deliver for humanity. It's not required for it to supplant the dollar. It still provides this check on tyranny. It provides this exit. It will, all the things we kind of hypothesize about seem to already be starting to some degree, just because people can exit their local currency for Bitcoin should they so choose. And that will only become more and more attractive as Bitcoin stabilizes and just becomes more accepted and just feels safer and more normal over time, just by us talking about it, by number going up, by more and more people owning it, and it just being kind of, what this big flip was with the ETFs. If you want to go back to something in the pro column, it was so tangible before January of this year and after January of this year, and I'm sure you felt it in your circles and all the people that Galaxy talks to. It went from you having to spend some social or professional capital to have conversations about Bitcoin, to now you being the Bitcoin guy in your circles or whoever you were going to talk to. It was accretive to you. You were now a chip that could be played. And so, I just constantly in frickin' Beverly Hills or Santa Monica or Brentwood, just getting like paraded out now by these, multi-billion-dollar money managers. And they're like, oh, can you come to this lunch? Oh, can you come to this happy hour? And it's like, to some degree, yeah, I can. I mean, there's not that much in it for me right now today. There's a little bit because sometimes, we do have a growing advisor business, but for the most part, it's just kind of interesting to observe that flip. I think was largely because Uncle Larry and Auntie Abby became the best known Bitcoin marketers this side of Sailor.
Yeah, it's hard to say that Bitcoin is, say, just some risky, internet token when Larry Fink is saying that it's a hedge against global instability, right?
Yeah. Yep. Got a few legs to stand on with, Druck and PTJ and
Yeah.
Bill Miller and all these big ETF firms. And then, and then MicroStrategy being the best performing stock of the last 4 years. Like, it's just kind of on and on. And now I don't even know what it looks like right now. I know in the in the pre-show, you wanted to talk about, symbols and flows or signals and flows. I mean, even before this weekend, we were up like 2x month over month on new users and volume. It looks absolutely insane this morning. I'm getting, I have reps messaging me saying they have like 55 new emails, just people hitting up their email address.
Yep.
So that's like outside of the people coming to the site and signing up for the app and things like that. So it's the flood is definitely here, and I think this pump over the weekend, right after the election, is what probably starts retail participation in this bull market. It hadn't come yet, and I think it's really here.
Yeah, I hadn't seen a lot of sign of it yet either, and just digesting some of the numbers, right? You've seen, like, I don't know, you've seen open interest on exchanges finally go up. You've seen Coinbase. I saw that the classic like app store ranking sort of thing, Coinbase, Cash App. Funny thing about Cash App, by the way, somebody posted the thing. Cash App's been in like the top 5 consistently the whole time. Like Cash App's like app store rankings, like a stable coin, basically. Like, so that didn't show much, but Coinbase is so much more volatile. It's like, oh, nobody in the world cares at all. And then it's like, oh my God, everybody looks like it's on the uptrend too. No surprise though, because right, the president-elect is just extremely pro Bitcoin, at least in his statements and speeches.
Yeah.
I mean, is that, I mean, I was thinking about this, like Satoshi sends this email to, October 31st, 2008 to, 30 to 50 people. And now the president-elect says he wants to make America the Bitcoin center of the universe and the crypto capital of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that, are we going to accelerate even? I mean, we've been growing like great, Bitcoin for years, but.
Look, so you get into the numbers a little bit there, like acceleration, meaning like a larger percentage gain in this trough to peak versus the last one would mean going higher than 350K. So if you think that we're accelerating and that this cycle is going to have larger growth than the last one in percentage terms, that's what you're saying. It's too early for me to make a call on that. Also, these bull markets are, the retail peak of them is happening faster than every 4 years, right? The last one was actually 3 years and 4 months apart, because I think it peaked in the December 2017, and then the actual price peak that wasn't manipulated in 2021 was April of 21. Yep. And there was kind of like a manufactured pump to get people out of their Solana bags, basically.
I was going to say, what are you referring to? Because I've heard a lot of good theories on this. You're talking about the November 2021 sort of second
had
double
basically
pop.
No retail participation. It was just fake. It was like leverage and insiders, and there was an algo running on FTX that looked pretty rigged. And I mean, I think the most plausible thing is there were actually a lot of big players with huge Solana bags, and they needed Bitcoin to pump. And it was cheaper to spend that money to make Bitcoin pump and then be able to dump your Solana and get out of that trade. And I think that's what they did.
Interesting.
That's what I actually think happened from like April through November of 2021.
So that recovery from the China ban, which was what, like July 2021?
Yeah, June was the ban, and it dropped 40%. And I think it hit 29 maybe in June or July. And then the march from 29 back up to 69, I think, was largely bullshit.
Yeah, there is really, James Check and TXMC both, I think, have put forth some good on-chain data to support this, that like you saw address usage, new wallets or new addresses and whatnot, transaction counts all spike in the January to April timeframe, as you would expect, but did not recover as price recovered from June to November. Just one way of looking at it. I haven't done a lot of research into this part of it. I remember that day when we retook the all-time high, like, I don't know, November 8th or something. It was right around when CME futures ETFs launched. I think ETFs, futures ETFs. I always wondered if that marked, remember the December 2017 peak was when CME futures launched, almost to the day, from like 10K to 20K in like 5 days or something. 5 or 6
days. It was nuts. Yeah. I do remember waking up to an alert on my Delta app in like, mid-December and like making a buy at like 6 a.m. or something like that, on vacation in Palm
Just like,
Springs.
oh my God. Oh man. Let me
Buying the
ask.
top forever, my friend.
Yes, Cory, you were mentioning before, by the way, to go back to another topic, you were talking about scaling and how that is necessary to bring the medium of exchange use case in particular, but maybe all of adoption. You mentioned Arc and Lightning. Like, have you been paying attention to the sort of debates on opcodes and perhaps new soft forks to enable other stuff? I know both Arc and Lightning, there's some that would be helpful to them as well. Like, have you been following the development standpoint? And if so, like, you have any
Yeah,
takes on
to some degree, but playing the role that I usually play, which is the journalist, essentially, like that's my training. And then I was a consultant, and I basically try to ask questions to try to tease out what's actually going on. So I just kind of wear that hat, and people can like it or not, but I'm going to keep on asking questions and try to figure it out. And it's really tends to be a good way to find signal. It also tends to be a good way to find the people who provide signal, who kind of see it the same way, and who can clearly delineate between what they know and what they think, and when they're just kind of exploring. So it's fun when I do have a little extra time. I do tend to like to dive into that and find the threads where everybody's discussing it. And I do have back channel to a lot of the people involved in these discussions where I can, ask my dumbest questions in the background, thank God, not always in public. But, I think there's two factions, basically, the way I see it, and the way I think it breaks down. I think there's one faction that wants to enable some set of things so that they can do whatever their creativity allows. And there's another faction that wants a goal, a set goal that is easier to get a broad base of support for, and then you turn on the things that enable that or make that better, which let's call that kind of like the lightning path. It was like, hey, we knew that we needed a couple of things for lightning, and so we turned those things on. And so that's generally the camp that I'm in. Like, if there's something that I want to see in the world, then I want to do the minimum amount of changes to Bitcoin to enable that thing that's very clearly that you want. That's admittedly my bias. I don't want to bring all shit coins onto Bitcoin. I don't want to invite the government like right into our living room. Some of it's going to happen anyway, but I'm generally like not in favor of SOBs, which is shit coins on Bitcoin. So I think that probably the best argument right now for doing something is like, ARC is made a lot better with CTV. And it's pretty damn well understood, and there's much more limited potential downsides versus something like OpCat or a whole bunch of other things. And then the other thing is like, there's no rush here. I actually don't. I think it's kind of a false pressure thing trying to say that we need to rush. Anytime somebody says we got to do something right now, I'm like, I don't believe you, like, because you don't have a reason for that. And then there's also just, the longer you let smart people hack at things and come up with things, like I haven't even dived into KaleidoScript to understand what that can mean, but it's another new way to scale, and like we'll see what BitVM turns into. And the art guys, for a year thought that they kind of needed something like covenants to be able to have interactivity, and then they realized there was actually a way to do it without it, and they could have like covenant less interactivity with Arc. And so some of it is like, just say no for an extra year or two and see if they can develop something that doesn't, come with a bunch of collateral damage. But, I think it's good to have that balance and have that interplay. And I know there was just a, kind of a mini conference up in Boston, and I'm catching up on some of that. And I think it's exciting. And I think there was a good chat in Lugano between people that see it different ways. And I think continuing to let these people kind of hash it out is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, very clearly, like my role is not to advocate one way or the other. I really just try to put on that, I was wearing my Mizzou sweatshirt before I got on this, but Missouri Journalism School grad, and that's the role that I like to play, is just ask questions.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable take. I think I agree with your delineation of the camps, and regardless of whether it's shit coins or something else, I think you're absolutely right that one faction effectively wants to make it easier to bring generalized smart contracting. That could mean anything. Now, if it's like crypto, we know it's going to be like tokens, DeFi, NFTs, et cetera, right? Like that's
Mhm.
pretty much all there is. Stable coins could maybe get stable coins some other way, right? I know the guys at Lightning Labs think there's a way to do it on Lightning and have, Taproot Asset Protocol working. And then, yes, the other side says, no, what we really need is, first of all, something less expressive, first of all, right off
Yeah.
the bat. I think, interestingly, I also try to play a similar role. I think Jeremy Rubin's OpCTV is actually the only one I've actually expressly supported.
Hmm.
I'm on his website as a supporter of it. Remember how contentious it was when he was pushing that a couple years ago, and it seemed really like, I think reasonably in some cases, that it was more about his form of the advocacy rather than the substance of the
I'll tell you,
debate.
I think it was because people couldn't point to something that was made better because of it. And what I saw was people that I consider high signal flip in favor of CTV when it became clear that it had a benefit for ARK. And that's what I think changed it. And I think that was the tipping point that made people broadly in favor of CTV. And that's why I think that is, of the current batch, I think that's probably the thing that actually eventually gets merged, is probably just CTV. I don't think you're going to see Rusty's cleanup. I don't think you're going to see Ellen Hance, although it's great branding. Ellen Hance is awesome branding.
Yeah.
I think it might end up being just 119 CTV.
I mean,
You know,
it's very good, by the way. Great for custody, great for time locking, covenants as a thing. The other thing I think is there was a misunderstanding at the time. People thought that one of the fears with covenants was sort of like covenants in perpetuity, right? So think of a covenant as an encumbrance on the future spending of coins, and they thought that the government could like mandate that, say, Coinbase would only let you withdraw with this perpetual covenant that theoretically the government could use to take back your coins one day, but the reality is, I think CTV expressly makes that impossible. It's like a
right.
much more conservative version of covenant. So there was some
Yeah,
misunderstanding too, I
I'm
think.
with you, man. And, I think look, I really like that just delineation of the two because it's such a fundamentally different view of Bitcoin. I was going to say worldview, but view of Bitcoin as to I want to be able to change whatever I want, give me lots more tools versus I want to make changes specifically in service of a particular goal that has broad support. And, I'm not going to name names here, but some very, very prominent developers and frankly, just business people in the space really want to bring every possible thing that's done in the world of shitcoins onto Bitcoin. That's their stated goal. I don't share that goal. Then there are others that say, no matter what the downsides of, like, you know, MEV or MEVil or whatever, or inviting the government and regulators, into Bitcoin because there's 1,000 times more scamming. I actually posed this to a well-known developer, and publicly you can find it. I'm not going to name the name, and basically said like if it improved like spendability and sort of scalability of Bitcoin by 0.00001% and increased the likelihood of the government, coming and fucking with Bitcoin and Bitcoiners by 1,000x, would you be in favor of it? And he said, absolutely. And I think that kind of, no room for nuance and no room for kind of like butting up against the real world and meat space. And I think that isn't really that helpful. And these are people that are, whether it's I want all shit coins on Bitcoin as fast as possible and anything that you could possibly dream of, I want all the scams here, and no care whatsoever for humans that live on Earth in the real world and have meat space problems like jail. I don't think that occupying that edge is particularly helpful.
Yeah, there's a big debate, I think, among in the Bitcoin space about, there's this line that's often said, and there's some truth to it, that, the original idea was like that, well, like, altcoins would be test nets for Bitcoin. And if something there was interesting or worked, then eventually it would be incorporated into Bitcoin. But for a variety of reasons, both probably social and technical, most of those things, if there even are any, some people deny that there are even anything worth, right? I mean, you're questioning whether anything out there is even worth bringing to Bitcoin, I think, fairly. But also it's difficult to bring, so none of it sort of happened. And so now the argument is like, well, we should get this generalized stuff because there are economies happening elsewhere that could happen to Bitcoin. And it's a very interesting debate about like, well, doesn't like the Bitcoin maximalist want, if it's going to exist, shouldn't happen on Bitcoin? I think you've given a compelling response as to why not.
There's all kinds of things I don't want to see on Bitcoin. Like I don't want to see MLM scams on Bitcoin and, pharmaceutical fraud and like a million other things like,
Yeah.
don't want to see it on Bitcoin. Like, um,
Right.
I will say, by the way, if you want to just call out an edge on the opposite side that I think is not useful to occupy, and therefore I don't, it would be very disingenuous to claim that there hasn't been anything good to come from, research, at least in altcoins, because there are things that have made Bitcoin better that were originated by, developers and thinkers on altcoins. So, to some degree, they have served historically as test nets. I just think none of the tokens are going to have value long term. And so I just don't think they're good to invest in.
Yeah, I don't think that's that controversial of a view, to be honest. I think it's pretty.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I know a lot of smart people who are into altcoins that very much question the investment theses on various categories of them.
Yeah, but they
you can
don't mind
imagine-
catching a pump and trading.
Yeah, I mean, I would say like, outside of like effectively stable coins, this is how I've been talking about it, that like if we look at the broad crypto space, obviously you have Bitcoin as like a deep value, a store of value, the original, the most, whatever, reliable, dependable, decentralized, et cetera. Sort of set that aside. If we look at the rest of crypto, you've got stable coins that are widely used. They don't really matter what platform they're on because they're, liabilities to an issuer. So like people ask me all the time, like, why is there all this tether on Tron? And I'm like, well, I mean, they're like, isn't Tron like a bad blockchain? And I'm like, it probably is. But to be clear, if like Tron like goes down, Tether can just be like, hey, you had Tether on Tron. Like, here's a form where you put your Tron address and you sign a message proving you owned that when it did work. You don't need the blockchain to sign that message.
Nope.
And then just put in your Ethereum address now. We'll just cancel them over there and give them to you, right? So like the platform, the L1 there doesn't matter. And then like, DeFi,
I would say like one
Yeah.
hilarious thing, because I've dealt with USDT here and there in the mining space. You don't need to send, if you have a friendly relationship with the operators, you don't need to send test transactions.
Yeah.
You don't have to bother because you just can call somebody and fix it if something goes wrong.
Yeah, it's centralized by inherently. I mean, to be honest, right? All tokenized anything that is off chain, it's not a native digital asset, is centralized by like an equity too. Same thing, but stocks on the blockchain. If something screws up with the blockchain, like you just call up like the issuer and they just fix it.
That's why. So we talk a lot in, I guess I just think a lot about how to kind of square the circle of, having battled and I think won the battle versus crypto over the last 5 or 6 years. And how do you let people kind of gracefully exit and come back around? And, because there's a lot of Ivy League B school certificate programs on blockchain at this point, and a lot of VP of innovation people at studios that have been pumping NFT projects out here in LA and, similar flavor of that for blockchain stuff, crypto stuff on Wall Street. Like you got to give these people an out. So there has to be something that you're allowed to call crypto blockchain that actually delivers real value. And I think real world asset tokenization, which is, incremental improvements to financial IT or financial rails, is the escape hatch where they can basically say, yeah, that's what I meant the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And you let them out and you don't, sort of saddle them with the scarlet letter that says they wasted 7 years of their life or whatever. Like you got to give them an out.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. And I think a lot of them will argue that, look, that incremental improvement is an improvement, right? And so why not?
Yeah.
And to me, I've always said, like, you tell me that, like, bank A and bank B have a faster way to settle, like, let them. Like, that shouldn't even be a question.
Great.
Just upgrade your tech.
And there's just no pretending that it's decentralized or permissionless. It's permissioned, it's private keys, it's a shared database, and it's a consortium. And there's nothing wrong with that.
You mentioned, Cory, I have to ask, you had some business with Tether. I saw that you guys are in litigation with some former employees and Tether. And I was wondering if you could tell us what that was about.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can go and read the complaint. It's good reading, and there's some pretty good summaries out there. I think the press generally covered it pretty fairly and pretty accurately. But yeah, we were partners with them in a mining joint venture and building a big mining business, and had seen a lot of success under Swan's exclusive management of that. We had the fastest ramp up of hash rate in Bitcoin history. Went from 0 to 12 exahash in just under a year. So that was really exciting, and had big plans to keep going forward. And as alleged in the complaint, which is public record, basically, I think I'll probably stop there. let's let the complaints speak for itself. But it is a page turner, and it's fun reading. And I think that we've proven our mettle in being able to manage capital in that space, and intend to do it again in the not too distant future. And I actually think that's a really cool topic to hit, because there's something that we came up with called managed mining, which is, not that different than kind of what I guess Blockstream probably does, maybe what Galaxy has done, for big investors or whatever in the past. What I like about giving your investor, leaving the assets on their balance sheet so that your investor actually owns it, it's very similar to like how BlackRock manages capital in the real estate business. And then you just do it on a profit share. So you have that kind of perfect alignment. You have a lot of incentive to keep SG&A low, which is not generally a feature of a lot of the public miners. Very heavily compensated teams and large teams and things like that. And it's closer. But what may be the most interesting thing is I think there's a really nice analog to MicroStrategy, and Saylor's goal in a lot of ways is to let people that couldn't invest in Bitcoin upside get access to that through the stock for the equity guys, and through the convertible debt for the fixed income guys. And when we started pitching managed mining back in April, May, it was fascinating how quickly we obviously started with the kind of big pools of alternative investment managers, but very quickly started to get inbound from fixed income, because they just see it as a bond with a variable coupon. So they put the money in, and then they get Bitcoin back. And now they have exposure to something that has either low or even inverse correlation to the other stuff in their portfolio. And it has the risk reward profile of Bitcoin, because you're actually stacking Bitcoin as an investor, even though you're a fixed income guy. So I do think that will have, whether it's us doing it or us and lots of other people doing it, I think that will be another big leg up for capital coming into the mining space over the next few years.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I like your point about thinking of it like almost like a bond. When I was doing VC at Fidelity, I got pitched a lot on venture rounds for Bitcoin miners. And we were always saying, like, this is a heavy capital intensive business, right? Like, we're, no offense, but like we're a VC. We'd like to be in effectively software businesses, right? Like, but maybe debt is the correct way to finance this. And I think the market has started to figure that out pretty well.
Yeah. Well, and you're starting to see it a little bit. That was the last round of capital. We actually invested in that round from Bitcoin Opportunity Fund for Cormant, Jamie Macavity. And they basically did like a Bitcoin denominated debt deal with recourse to the rigs. And I really liked the way it was structured, and you model it out, and it's a good deal, has great IRR. So I think you'll start to see a lot more people think about it that way in mining. Yeah, that actually is interesting too, because it kind of dovetails. I had a lengthy conversation on Sunday. I had a 2.5-hour round trip to go to pick up some special donuts for my daughter's birthday party. And so I jumped on a Spaces and spotted Tad. Have you met Tad, the former Sotheby's CEO?
No, I've only seen him speak.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's kind of blowing up now from a viral video from last week. But so he jumped on the Spaces. We ended up talking for about an hour, and we were talking about like who are the natural borrowers of Bitcoin denominated, like who's actually going to borrow Bitcoin, because that's kind of the thesis for some future state where MicroStrategy having a bunch of Bitcoin on their balance sheet actually is like cash generating or income generating. And it's funny, I think it will be unlocked when Bitcoin as a medium of exchange comes into wide use, which is tied to the removal of cap gains and the explosion of a bunch of fintechs and intermediaries doing payments in different ways, who aren't going to want to have to have a bunch of Bitcoin on their balance sheet to facilitate those payments. So they're going to rent the capital. And they're the only ones that can actually afford it despite Bitcoin's volatility, because they can borrow just enough kind of instantly with those transfers. It'll be like a line of credit that they draw on. They put the capital to work in the channel or in the ASP, the ARC service provider, or whatever comes along in the future. And they'll be able to make that Bitcoin return in a very forecastable way. And so anyway, it was just kind of fun. Like when I do get a little bit of time, like some drive time, it is where my mind goes. Like I never intended to run a financial services company and be in this space, just selling Bitcoin for 10 years, but I'm going to sell Bitcoin and put it in IRAs and do asset-backed loans and do all this SOV stuff for as long as it takes to get to the explosion of medium of exchange. But I hope it comes sooner, because that's the really fun stuff.
We might be accelerating. It feels right now like we are. Cory, before we wrap, tell us what's next for Swan, what you've got on the roadmap, or what gets you excited. I mean, we might be about to enter a rip-roaring bull market. I mean, every Bitcoin company and Bitcoin CEO has got to be thinking about how to position and what products and services their clients might want. What can users of Swan expect?
Yeah. So, we're excited to be bringing some more retirement solutions next year. So we'll have 529 plans, SEP IRAs, and solo 401ks. We announced all that with our new partnership with Equity Trust. Another great example of one of these companies that, has been around 50 years and kind of well-known name, and have their own building and a bunch of nice art and go to steakhouses and shit. Like, it's a different kind of provider than you used to have. So excited about that. We have a couple of new products coming out in the next one. We hopefully will get out in 2 months, that I think will be the splashiest thing that we've ever done. Then it'll make some waves. So can't really talk about that until we actually get it completely done. And then the other one is just something that's been kind of a gap in the market for the last few years, that we used to have and don't really anymore. And you can probably guess what that is, but we should get that out in market in Q1. And then I guess just broadly, it's trying to get a team where so few of us were around the last time there was a ripping bull market. I think we started with, probably started 2021 with 25 or 30 people. And, so there's maybe 20 of us left that went through that. And just explaining that you're not going to get any work done for 6 months, because you're just going to be trying to let people give you money as fast as possible all the time, and just trying to smooth that out and just be like, yes, we can take your money,
onboard people, send them their Bitcoin, just
and with that high volume, there's always some percentage of edge cases that get hung up in some way, but then that gets multiplied by a lot when there's a lot more people, and you're trying to figure out which one of these influxes of people is a fraud ring versus this is just like a high net worth circle that all found out about it at the same time, and they all happen to be dentists in Dallas, and it's like, let them in. It's just that constant battle of exchanging reversible fiat for the best bearer asset in the world that can be sort of pseudonymously spirited away if you accidentally give it to the wrong person.
I love it. Staying on top of it. It is, you should be spiriting it away, by the way. I've always respected Swan's promotion of self-custody as well, auto withdrawals and stuff like that.
Hey, 10K no fee when you join Swan, and always free withdrawals.
There you go. Cory Klippsten, co-founder and CEO of Swan. Check him out at swan.com. Near all-time highs, 89.6 as we record today on Tuesday, November 12th. Cory, thank you so much for coming on Galaxy Brains.
Yeah, man. Good rip. Thanks, Alex.
That's it for this week's episode of Galaxy Brains. Thanks to our guest, Cory Klippsten, co-founder and CEO of Swan Bitcoin, swan.com, and our friend Bimnet Abibi from Galaxy Trading. As always, everybody have a safe and happy weekend, and we will catch you next week. Thanks for listening to Galaxy Brains, the weekly podcast from Galaxy Research. If you enjoy the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Galaxy Research, sign up for our weekly newsletter at gdr.email read our content at galaxy.com/research, and follow us on Twitter at GLXY Research. See you next week.